All right, woo, let's go. Let's get into this game right here. We got the fan game of the week. You guys have chosen. I gave you guys all those options right there. A little bit surprising, but you guys picked number 15 Clemson at Florida State. Good choice. Great rivalry game. I really thought people were probably going to choose either the Louisville or an SMU game or maybe the Washington Michigan championship rematch, but not a whole lot of people are talking about this Clemson and Florida State game, which, despite the Seminoles' struggles, they are at home. It is at night. It is still going to be a tricky environment. And it is still going to be a tough one for Clemson to go and win. But I'm going to keep it 100 with everybody here. I'm a realist. Florida State is kind of cooked this season. Let's just keep it 100%. Let's keep it real. They're 1-4 right now. They started the year in the top 10, number 10 in the country, and they're 1-4. So just keeping it a buck here. Okay, they're not making it to the playoff. They're not even making it to the ACC championship game. But this team still has talent, and they've still got a really good head coach, and he's still got a solid coaching staff. And there are some good pieces with this team, and maybe, just maybe, the Noles could still create chaos in the ACC if they could find some other things that could work in their favor. Hello, everybody. You're listening to the College Sports Superfan. Today, we're going to get into number 15 Clemson at Florida State. So, let's talk about what the Noles have working for them and what they have working against them. This is kind of an interesting point of this game. The Seminoles' offense has been terrible, terrible this year. And first point I want to say is it's not going to get a whole lot better in the passing game theoretically against Clemson because DJ Uyungule is not suiting up for this one. He hurt his thumb apparently, so he's not going to play. So it'll either be likely between a couple of freshmen that I'm going to talk about in just a second, but the passing game may still be a struggle against the Clemson Tigers, or you never know. One of these young kids could really impress, and we could end up in a whole different, interesting game. But Florida State, even with DJ as the starting quarterback, is only averaging 15.2 points per game, compared to Clemson, who's averaging 42 points per game. Now, they've played some weak teams in there, right? Sure, I understand that. But still, the Tigers' offense significantly better. It's not even close. Florida State's best scoring output this season was 21 points against Georgia Tech in Ireland. Little did we know that would probably be the best performance Florida State would have of the whole season. And the Noles did pick up a win against California, 14-9, as you heard in the Miami at Cal preview video. You can go check that out if you haven't seen that already. But then they got absolutely thrashed by SMU. So Southern Methodist comes in, obliterates Florida State in their first ever, 8 year as an ACC member, dominating the previous year's ACC champions. Again, not the same team, but still, Florida State badly needs to win this game. Let's just keep it real, because again, they're not making it to the playoff. They're not even making it to the ACC championship. The best they could do is mix things up in the ACC and hope to get to 6-6. Well, right now they're 1-4, and you look at the schedule that they have ahead. Here's what they've still got on their plate. They've got arch rival number 8 Miami on the road. Right after this game, they have to play undefeated Duke, who is supposed to be one of the worst teams in the conference again. Brand new head coach, Manny Diaz, right? They're not the same team they were last year, except once again, Duke has found a way to get to 5-0, and they've beaten, okay teams like North Carolina and Northwestern. So Duke is pretty solid. They're at home. Florida State's going to have to go on the road to take on them. They're going to have to go on the road to take on currently number 14 ranked Notre Dame at the end of the season. So if you're looking at it, that likely is still 3 losses. Let's say they beat Duke, though. Let's just say that for argument's sake, right? But then let's say they still lose to Miami and Notre Dame. That would put them at 6 losses, meaning they would need to win the rest of their games, including against Duke and including against Clemson right here, and even including against Florida Gators, which, is more doable, but still not a gimme game, that's for sure. So they got to win this game against Clemson to even feel like they have a chance at going to any kind of postseason at all. So right now, Clemson is 14 and a half point favorite. It's pretty significant and it makes perfect sense, right, based on how the teams are going right now. But I truly believe this game could be closer than that. Let's talk about the quarterback situation. I already said DJU, he's injured. He wasn't really playing all that great, anyways. This season is really turned into a disaster for DJ. And it's really sad, unfortunately, but it's turned into a disaster for DJ here in Tallahassee. But they've got freshman Brock Glenn. He played, if you remember, he played a little bit last season. For those that watched Florida State football, they remember him from last year. Wasn't all that impressive, and technically, he has thrown 4 pass attempts this season, and he hasn't completed any one of them. So he's 0 for 4 so far. So there's literally still no stats on him on that. And then there's the highly talented freshman Luke Kromenhoek, who's a big time recruit that Mike Norvell was able to get. So maybe Norvell puts in the true freshman Kromenhoek. So we'll just have to see. It could either be Glenn, it could be Kromenhoek. Either way, there isn't a whole lot of experience there. But with both young guys, they're young and they've got a lot of upside, and there is some weapons, and they are at home. But still, going up against a top 15 team, that's going to be very difficult for whoever has to do that. And regardless, even if the quarterback situation, the quarterback room is just one thing, but really what's been even worse for Florida State, believe it or not, just to take some heat off of DJ, is the ground game has been atrocious. They are only averaging 65 rushing yards per game. That is horrible. That means there's some games where they're literally getting almost nothing. 65 rushing yards per game. The one running back who's looked okay has been last year's ACC championship MVP, Lawrence Toafili. He's got, 214 yards, which is 4.8 yards per carry, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So, hey, he's been pretty solid. And in the receiving core, there is some potential here. There really is. They got Ja'Kai Douglas, who's got 285 receiving yards and a touchdown. They have Kentron Poitier, who has 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Malik Benson, who has 185 yards. And tight end Kyle Morlock, who has 107. So those aren't crazy blow you away numbers, but there is still some talent here. And on defense, that's really where Florida State could have their strength. And on the defensive line, they have Marvin Jones, who has 12 tackles and 3 sacks. They have Patrick Payton, who had a lot of hype heading into this season. He hasn't been super stellar, but he does have 11 tackles and 4 sacks, which is not too bad. He may end up being one of the top sack leaders in the ACC still at the rate that he's going. At linebacker, they have DJ Lundy, who has 17 tackles. Blake Nicholson, who also has 17 tackles, but not nearly as many solo tackles. Cam Riley, who's got 16 tackles. Justin Cryer, who has 10 tackles and a fumble recovery and an interception. So the linebacker group has actually been pretty solid. And then at DB, they've got some fantastic defensive backs in the secondary, and they're really going to have to step it up against this Clemson passing game. But Shaheem Brown, who had a lot of hype heading into the season, has lived up to the hype for the most part with 28 tackles. They have Azariah Thomas, who has 21 tackles, and KJ Kirkland, who adds on 22 tackles as well. So this is a good secondary. They're not quite generating as many turnovers as they should. That could definitely be something that could be improved on. But then how about the Florida State special teams? So rarely in my videos do I mention the kicker and the punter, although they deserve love too. I will have to admit they are human beings as well, okay? They're human beings. But I typically don't talk about the kicker and the punter, but I will say for Florida State's case, they have an amazing kicker in Ryan Fitzgerald. I don't believe he's missed once yet. And they have a fantastic punter in Alex Mastromano, who probably is going to be playing on Sundays pretty soon. So their special teams is fantastic, at least in that regard. Way better than Clemson. So that's the one area where they have a serious edge over the Tigers. But let's talk about the Clemson Tigers real quick. Quarterback Cade Klubnik, he's been great. He's been much better than he's been the last year. He's got 984 yards, a 66% completion percentage, which I know isn't super stellar, but typically it's expected. If you've got 65% and above, you're technically doing pretty good, and he's got 66. So he's doing all right. He's got 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, plus 106 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. I remember the super long one he had in the last fan game of the week against NC State. That one went for over 50 yards. So he's done a pretty good job here. He's been pretty efficient with the football, and he's driving the team down the field. Phil Maffa at running back has been solid, 342 yards, which is 8 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. So you'd like to see him get in the end zone a little bit more, but at least when it comes to picking up yardage, he's a tough running back to bring down. You typically need a couple guys to tackle this veteran. And then at wide receiver, Clemson has a bunch of young wide receivers with tons of potential. One of them is freshman wide receiver Bryant Wesco. I don't know what it is about this freshman class. I've talked about it in so many other videos. You got guys like Ryan Williams at Alabama, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. You got Isaiah Hunter at California. Then you got guys like Bryant Wesco, a freshman who has 238 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus freshman wide receiver TJ Moore, who has 105 yards and a touchdown. And then Antonio Williams, he's got 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. Cole Turner has 111 yards and a touchdown. The tight end, Jake Brenningstool, who's a fantastic tight end, has 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's going to be potentially in the NFL as well. So the receiving core for Clemson is young overall. They have some veterans like Stool, but they're young overall. They've got so much potential. I think they're just scratching the surface with those guys like Wesco and Moore. And then on defense, the defensive line, especially the interior defensive line, has really not been that impressive for Clemson. So we'll get into that later. That's an area where I think Florida State could potentially win this game is by controlling the ground and running it up the middle and picking up huge yardage, but they got to get that ground game going. But the linebackers, those guys are going to be tough to get by. Barrett Carter, 20 tackles. Wade Wadaz has 26 tackles and an interception. He's going to come out of nowhere to be really, really good this season. Sammy Brown also has 20 tackles. So that's a good linebacker core. And then this secondary, they can be pretty tough as well. RJ Mickens has 22 tackles. Jaden Lucas has 13 tackles and an interception. Avion Terrell has 11 tackles and an interception and a fumble recovery. But again, as I said, their kicker is just a freshman, Nolan Hauser, but he has been better than their kicking situation last year, which was a complete disaster. But still, he's just a freshman. And then Aiden Swanson at punter has been okay, but nowhere near Mastromano's caliber. So let's get into some of the history real quick. These teams actually have not played a crazy amount of matchups against each other. They have technically been playing since 1970 on and off, but Florida State leads the all-time series 21-15, and it's gotten a lot closer since Clemson finally got into that top tier of being an elite program several years ago. The Seminoles last year won 31-24 in Death Valley. If you remember that game, that was a really, really good game that helped kind of prove to everybody, okay, the Seminoles are legit that year. And that broke a 7-game losing streak to Clemson, which is Clemson's longest winning streak in the series up to that point. So that ended that long losing streak there. But situations are completely different. The teams are clearly completely different. But can the Noles make it 2 in a row and get a big upset at home in Tallahassee? Well, here's my prediction. Florida State really can win this game. It's not out of the question. They're still a very talented team. Mike Norvell is a really good coach. They're at home. Got a great environment at night there, but they gotta get the run game going. They're gonna have a freshman quarterback in. DJ's not playing. even if DJ was playing, 65 yards rushing per game is terrible. That's just not going to get the job done. They have to find a way to open up those lanes in the middle, but Clemson's interior defensive line, as I've said, has not been very good this season. They've been kind of underwhelming. Nobody had, mind blowing stats when I was looking through the stat sheet, and they just seem to not be getting back there to stop other opposing teams' ground games very well that I've seen Clemson be able to do in the past with all those elite defensive linemen that are in the NFL today. So Florida State has to get the ground game going against a weak defensive line, and their special teams unit, as I've said many times, is significantly better than Clemson. So that can provide an edge if the game is close. But unfortunately, I just don't think the game is going to be terribly close. Clemson is way better than Florida State at this point. And yes, the Noles season technically already is over, but with this one, it's going to be really, really over as they're going to fall to 1-5. Give me Clemson to win this game by 10. Still could be super interesting. But I ultimately think, this hard fought game, Clemson just has way too much talent. They're going to come out on top in this one. But that is the game you have all chosen. Thank you so much for voting in the fan game of the week. I'm always interested to see what you guys think is going to be an intriguing game. And I love getting you guys more involved in these polls and whatnot. Also, make sure to leave your comments down below as to what you think is going to happen in this game. Is Florida State going to get this upset, or is Clemson going to walk away with this one easy? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this and be part of this community that we are creating here with the College Sports Super Fan. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for the videos next week.